Good afternoon and welcome to the 16th International Fortepiano Salon online. Fortunately, at least here where I am in the Catskills, it's fortunately for us, it's a little bit of a dreary day, and I hope that we have we're not keeping you too much from the last beautiful days of summer, because it's raining in many places on the East Coast. My name is Maria Rose, and I'm co-host with my colleague Yiheng Yang, who will introduce our program for today shortly. I just wanted to thank again the Catskill Mountain Foundation for their continued support for our venture. Our aim is to share our performances and some topics in piano history and from different angles. And today we will examine some lesser known women composers who wrote some really, really interesting music. And I think you will enjoy that. And so we are related to the Catskill Mountain Foundation, which has a piano performance collection at the museum with a lot of really beautiful instruments. And if you're in the neighborhood, I really encourage you to come and visit and try out some of their pianos. So for today, as I said, we will have some 18th century music by women composers. And before we start, I would encourage you, first of all, to put your name and where you're watching from in the chat boxes on Facebook and YouTube. And I also would like to tell you that our next Salon is on October 29th, and this will be very different, but also should be very exciting. It will be hosted in the Netherlands, and we will visit the pianos of the Geelvink collection, which has been situated in different places, but we will visit the pianos and also hear some young rising stars in the Fortepiano world play on the instruments and discuss them. So for now, let me share the screen with my co-host Yiheng Yang, who will tell you more about the program today. Hi, Yiheng.
Hi, Maria. Great to see you and great to have everyone here. Hello, friends of International Fortepiano Salon, and thanks again to Catskill Mountain Foundation. And as Maria said, please say hello to us in the comment chat boxes of YouTube and Facebook and tell us where you're viewing from, because we have friends from all over the world, and this is our way of connecting as people who love early pianos. So please say hello. We love to hear from you during the show. And at the end, we'll have a question and answer session. And that's another opportunity for you to participate. And as we have our wonderful music and discussion today, please think of some great questions for Maria and I and our wonderful guest. So right now, it's my great pleasure to introduce our 16th Salon. We're in our third season already. We started this salon as a way of connecting when we were all isolated at home during the COVID pandemic. And now it's been going for 3 years because there's so many of us who love to explore topics around early pianos and are passionate about it. And it's our joy to share what some of our wonderful colleagues and musicians are doing around the world with Fortepiano. Today's guest is joining me for our topic, which is called Guests at the Table, New Voices from the 18th Century Galant. And Guests at the Table is a little play on a composer I'm going to share about, Jane Mary Guest. But right now, we're going to focus on Mariana Martinez. And I have one of the great experts, I must say, on Mariana Martinez right now, and a good friend of Maria and I, Patricia Garcia-Gil. She is speaking to us from Greensboro, North Carolina at the university, where she is a doctoral student about to complete her dissertation on the piano music of Mariana Martinez. She's preparing an edition of the sonatas. And on top of that, she's just an incredible person and a wonderful performer and player on Fortepiano. So welcome, Patricia. It's so good to have you back on the Salon.
Thank you so much, really. I think I can go now. Like with this introduction, it's better if I go because, well, I have to say I'm not an expert in Mariana Martinez. I'm just a lover of her music and very passionate about getting to know more and more. And as you said, I'm writing the dissertation on her three surviving keyboard sonatas. And it's so interesting. I'm in the middle of a process. I have everything in my mind, but it still needs to be done. And I'm very grateful to many people who are supporting this project, including you, because of having me here. I'm so happy to be here again, and and sharing the few things I know about her and some of her music, which I think speaks better about her figure.
Great. So tell us who was Mariana Martinez, and then we'll keep going, and you can share with us her music.
Right. So Mariana Martinez was a Viennese composer of Spanish Italian origin, because her grandfather was Spanish, actually, and then her father was an Italian soldier who moved from Naples, to Vienna. And because of his friendship with the Italian famous poet Metastasio, they lived together in the same house. In the house in Vienna, where also Haydn and Nicola Porpora lived. So it was like an incredible situation happening in this building called Michaeler House in the center of Vienna. And of course, Mariana Martinez benefited from this really privileged situation. So basically, Metastasio, the poet, who was the most renowned librettist from the 18th century, became like a father for her, and of course her mentor. And he made sure that she had like a complete education in the Enlightenment style. So basically she knew about languages, about literature, about playing the keyboard, singing, composing, and of course she was taught by Haydn because he was living there. It was very convenient, keyboard playing, and then she was taught by Porpora, singing. And then her composition teacher, as she mentions, because she has an autobiographical sketch that has survived, and she mentions Bono, the composer Giuseppe Bono, as her counterpoint teacher, her composition teacher. But of course, probably she learned composition from Haydn as well and from Porpora, because everything was very integrated in the 18th century. In this same autobiographical sketch that I'm actually using a lot for my dissertation to shape my text, because I think like the only thing that can speak better than her words is her music. But, since I have to write something, and I think it's very important to contextualize her figure, to understand better, like where her music is coming from, her influences, and what she might have had access to, I am using her own words. So she also mentions some old composers and new composers, of course, in relation to her time. The old ones being Handel, Caldara, and Lotti, masters of counterpoint, but also maybe the first generation that started the Galant style. And the new ones that she mentions are Hasse, Jomelli, and Galuppi. So basically, all her influences are very, very tied to the Italian style, the Napolitan style, and her music reflects it really well. So, and also this mix, actually, there is this quote by Burney, who actually cites Metastasio's thoughts about Martinez's style. And he said, her style was a most agreeable mix of antico, old, and moderno, new. So, like there is other recounts from the time, for example, by Giambattista Mancini, a castrato and author of singing books, who wrote, yes, I'm going to read it. I heard her myself when she was still very young, sing and play the cembalo with astonishing mastery, accompanying her own compositions, sang and expressed with such force of musical emphasis that Signore Abate Metastasio himself felt again the emotion that he had been able to excite in the human heart with his inimitable librettos. So this is just to mention like how she was so appreciated during her lifetime. I mean, definitely by her mentor, but also by many other musicians, famous musicians. She, when she was young, it was when she composed the 3 sonatas that I'm studying. But then later she kept composing, of course. She only published 2 of the sonatas, the A major that we will hear, and also the E major. the G major one, which is the third, we only have a manuscript that has survived. But from the other two, we have like the first editions. We don't have the autograph from the other two, but we have the first editions that were published during her lifetime, actually in a very curious anthology between other Italian composers of sonatas. So, well, I just think that maybe it is better to listen to her music. And we will listen now to a live performance, that something I played here from my second recital, of her sonata in G major on a Viennese fortepiano that belongs to Dr. Andrew Willis. Thank you for that. Well, I was thinking I should mention we don't really know if she played these sonatas in public, but it's very likely because she hosted a very, very important music salon at her home in her late years when she was older. And then especially when she received Metastasio's estate, which allowed her to live as a freelance, so as an independent musician. So she probably did. And what we know is like some of the music that she performed, and it was almost always like Italian composers. So you can tell also from this sonata like how Italian her style is. This sonata is probably the one that is like more elaborated and more technically demanding. The other ones, even though like maybe not all the ornamentation that I've played is written, but the other two are much more simple in the writing. And they actually accept a lot of embellishment and variation between the repetitions. So probably that was like a reminiscence of the da capo aria, because she, as a singer, she was probably really, I mean, not probably, but for sure, because there are quotes from her time, describing how good she was at singing and at variation and ornamentation. So why wouldn't she apply that to her keyboard music, right? In any case, I hope that you have enjoyed it. This actually the way I fell in love with her figure was through her music, and because it's just like fun and virtuosic, but also emotional, and all in the just measure, like the right amount of everything. And I think the first piece I played is her sonata in A major that we will listen to in a moment. Maybe in 2020 or maybe 19. And when I played for the first time, I wasn't thinking too much about like the edition that I was using, and I was using a 19th century edition that had been reprinted, in the 19th century, and it was very like extremely heavily edited. So for a while I thought it was okay, but then I thought, I mean, this cannot really be like part of her style, because like it's just not the kind of writing that it would have been common in the 18th century. So that really lightened my curiosity about finding more about Martinez and seeing if there were like more editions. And of course there are, and I'm like, with this new edition, I'm not like trying to disrespect any of the current editions, because some of them are really great. But I just wanted to try contributing humbly to the field of early music, because there is no edition that offers comments from a historically informed perspective. And also that my other intention is to remain really like faithful to the manuscript, and then include the notes in a way that don't disturb the way the music looks. So this edition will also fulfill the requirements of my DMA dissertation, as Yiheng mentioned. And, and as I was saying, it will be accompanied by this document, contextualizing Martinez education and connections. And it will compare also like the sonatas that were published and with her manuscript, because there are some differences which are really interesting and maybe revealing about the instruments that she had used. So even though most of the times we have the word cimbalo, which could be like very open as clavier, not indicating a precise instrument, but just like a keyboard instrument, we have quotes from her time describing how she was playing the harpsichord, sometimes like precisely, but sometimes just the cembalo. And then we have one that is very interesting because it's from Michael Kelly, British tenor that played in Vienna for Mozart's operas. And he describes how Mozart and Mariana Martinez played fortepiano duets together. So, maybe she probably, because of her situation and the way that she wasn't born a noble, but she became, probably because of her connections through Metastasio and with, the Empress. So she became a noble, so she probably had like a very privileged situation and access to a lot of instruments. And this is the time where the fortepiano was like becoming the favorite instrument. So that's the other side. I wanted to explore her music more like on the fortepiano rather than other instruments. But of course, it sounds great everywhere. Like if you play it on the harpsichord or the modern piano, it's also great. And then finally, with the aim of advancing accessibility to this music written by women composers, I will be sharing my edition when it's finished on the wonderful website Her Classical, that promotes music written by women composers from the 18th century. So Alisa Freeman, I wanted to credit her, is the rightful creator of this project. And me, I'm just an enthusiastic collaborator that aims to take care of the historically informed perspective of these works, to the extent that I can. So finally, let me introduce the next video, which is a live performance at the Berkeley Festival as an EMA, Early Music America Emerging Artist, where I was very lucky to mix both of my passions, music and theater, as well as media, to try conveying the significance of Martinez's figure through contemporary to her sources. So you will see kind of like a different beginning to the one that you might expect. So it's not starting with music, but with some shadows that we're aiming also to represent like the light and dark, the chiaroscuro, also like related to the Enlightenment. And so the first shadow, it's reading her own writing. So Martinez writing, when she was thanking in a letter the Accademia Filarmonica di Bologna for accepting her as an academic. And she was the first woman actually that was accepted in that really famous and important institution in Europe. The second one is actually the one I mentioned from Michael Kelly's memoirs, and that describes the way she was favorite of Mozart and how they performed together at Martinez Salon.
Alla celebre et insigne Accademia dei Filarmonici di Bologna. L'inesplicabile contento che io provo illustri e generosi accademici, nel sentire ammesso anche il mio a far numero fra chiari nomi di celebri compositori che rendono luminosa cotesta armonica adunanza.
The colleges of Bologna and Pavia gave her the title of dottoressa, and deputations came from both those places with her diploma. When I was admitted to her conversationes and musical parties, she was in the vale of years, yet still possessed the gaiety and vivacity of a girl, and was polite and affable to all. Mozart was an almost constant attendant at her parties, and I have heard him play duets on the pianoforte with her, of his own composition. She was a great favourite of his.
Bravo, Patricia. That was a beautiful performance and full of life and lyricism. The music of Mariana Martinez, one of her sonatas. And Patricia, thank you so much for introducing her music, playing it for us, telling us about her. And we look forward to reading your dissertation and seeing the new edition of Martinez's music. So thank you so much for joining us on the Salon today. And we'll see you at the Q&A. So if anyone has questions further for Patricia, save them for the end. And the next part, I'm going to take a brief moment to share with you some music I'm really excited about by another female composer from the 18th century, Jane Mary Guest, who lived in England, mostly in the town of Bath, England, between 1762 and 1846. And I am actually coming out with an album later this year, hopefully on the Duzel album, Duzel label in the UK, with one of the most wonderful Baroque violinists here in New York City and in North America, Aisslinn Nosky, who's concertmaster of the Handel and Haydn Society. And we tried out one of Jane Mary Guest's violin sonatas in a concert here in New York a few years ago and loved it. And then we discovered she wrote 6 of them. So today I'm going to be sharing with you short movements from a live performance of the fortepiano and violin sonatas of Jane Mary Guest. But quickly, who was Jane Mary Guest? She was a daughter of a tailor in the town of Bath, and Bath was a spa town for people to go and take baths in the spa and have a good time, sort of a resort town. So while her father was a humble tailor, he also rented out rooms, and many of the people that rented out rooms in their home were musicians. And one of the musicians who lived there started giving Jane Mary Guest lessons, and she was a child prodigy. She gave her first public performance at the age of 6, and by the time she was a teenager, she was known in other parts of England and performed a lot, and gained entree into the studio as a student of JC Bach, one of the sons of Bach, who made his career and is very famous in London as a composer and teacher and performer and impresario. So she studied with JC Bach, and we think that because of her ties with him, he introduced her to a lot of the important royalty and cultural leaders in London. So as a matter of fact, Jane Mary Guest later became a teacher of the Princess Charlotte of Wales. And Sarah, can you show us this? This is a quick portrait of Princess Charlotte of Wales. And funny story, Princess Charlotte of Wales only lived for 21 years, and she actually was heir to the throne of her father, Charles IV, but she didn't live long enough to ascend. And when she was a child, they wanted to educate her to prepare her to rule, and they wanted to give her a curriculum of very lofty religious education and such esoteric topics, studying with priests and learning theology. But she refused all of it. She hated all of that and didn't want to study that. The only thing she wanted to study was music and playing the piano with her teacher, Jane Mary Guest. And Charlotte became quite a good pianist. And in fact, Haydn heard her play and said, she's pretty good for a noblewoman or a queen, I think, sort of a backhanded compliment there by Joseph Haydn. So Jane Mary Guest was very well known and influential in England while she lived in the latter about 40 years of the 18th century and the first half of the 19th century. She was a very influential composer and performer in Bath, where she eventually settled as a married woman. Charles Burney, in his General History of Music, called her one of the most excellent players of keyboards in England. And so he lists her in his very important book, General History of Music. And here's a quote from European Magazine in the 1780s about Miss Guest's playing. To Miss Guest's execution on the harpsichord and grand pianoforte, we've often listened with rapture. Her fleetness and facility of finger, expression of touch, diversity of grace, and general mastery upon the instrument is without rivalship and thrills through the hearts of all who hear her. And another contemporary account of her playing, apparently she gave like 200 concerts in a period of like 3 years, says that people wept when she played. And one time she didn't play one of her own concertos, and someone was really sad and they started crying at the concert. So quite an important and influential woman performer and composer in England in her time. And we know that she was probably the first person to premiere a Mozart piano concerto as well in Bath. So first we're going to hear one of her sonatas that Aisslinn Nosky and I performed, a movement from a sonata by Jane Mary Guest that we performed here in New York City for the Roosevelt Island concert series. Sarah, could you bring up the image of Bath from the 1798? This is Bath, England in 1788, and they're a building called the Pump Room where people gather still today. I think it's called the Pump Room because of some Roman water pumps that were near there. So when I see this image of Bath when Jane Mary Guest lives, I can kind of connect this liveliness and variety of character that's always there. Her music is constantly changing and imaginative and very Italian and ornate as well, just like Martinez. And she did study singing with an Italian singing teacher, Sacchini, in addition to studying with JC Bach. Another thing of note about Jane Mary Guest, sort of telling you about how well respected and how popular her music was, is when she had subscriptions to her music, when people would receive the latest copy of her sonatas, she had a huge subscriber list for that. It was about 400 people, and half of them were women, and many, many very important nobility of the time. So quite a lady in the 18th century, and kind of tireless in her compositions, her performing life. And it's someone I really wish I could have met. But so to conclude our time, our little time together today in the Salon, we'll hear another movement from Jane Mary Guest B-flat Sonata. And if you want to hear all 6 of her sonatas, stay tuned. I'll let you know when the album comes out with Aisslinn Nosky on Baroque violin and playing this Christopher Clark Fortepiano.
Yiheng, you're muted.
Oh no, I was muted. I'm so sorry. I'm out of practice with the live streaming. So sorry. That was Jane Mary Guest, B flat sonata with Aisslinn Nosky on Baroque violin, and yours truly on the fortepiano for the Roosevelt Island concert series. Check out the album of all of Guest's 6 sonatas coming out later this year. And as you can hear, Guest is a really scintillating, fun composer. One of the people in historical music that I've played that I would really have loved to meet. Just seemed like a completely vigorous person who was making music and writing music as much as she could in every place that she could, and very influential. So speaking of wonderful, influential people here, Patricia and Maria Rose back with us. And now is the time to have a short Q&A with any questions from our audience. So please type in any questions now that you have having to do with what we shared with you today about the music of Martinez and with Guest. Yep. Or Maria, you had some questions for me about Guest while we were listening to her music.
Oh, yes, we were. I was kind of listening and wondering about something. I was wondering, tell me about the Roosevelt Island concerts. Is that something that you started since you lived there, or is it was it already an existing concert series?
Yeah, I did not start the concert series. Good friends of mine, Iris Jortner and Ralph Allen, who now live in Israel but still are involved very much. They started about 12 years ago. I can't remember. And so when we moved to Roosevelt Island 2 years ago, I just kind of joined that band. I had played on the series years ago as friends of these musicians, and it's a really nice. And
they have the church.
Yeah, that's the Good Shepherd Church on Roosevelt Island.
You were playing in a church, so that's.
Yes. There's a nice 19th century church here.
It's still a big schlep to bring your piano there, right? Doesn't matter if it's right around the corner. It's still
that's right.
It's still a hard thing to do.
Yes, that concert, there was a great war story having to do with fortepianism. I know, Maria, we share war stories about being on the road with your fortepiano to play concerts. And even though the Good Shepherd Church is only a quarter of a mile away from our apartment, my husband and I had to move the fortepianos ourselves and rented a U-Haul, and it was raining and may have lost one of our children for a few minutes.
Yeah, it's not any
only part of the pre-concert warm-up. So I attribute all my wrong notes to having had to drive the rented U-Haul down the street right before. Anyway, It was a lot of fun, that concert, and the music of Guests is a lot of fun to play. So thanks for having me share today.
It's a big part of being a fortepianist. It's not just that you play beautifully, but it's that you can deal with lots of very unforeseen situations. Bring your instrument, tuning it, having bright lights, knock it out of tune immediately, and all kinds of things that we don't talk about normally.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much, both of you. Also, I'm sorry, I have a delay, I think.
I have a question actually for Yiheng. So how is the violin part written? Is it like obbligato part, or is it something that you could in all of the sonatas, is it always an obbligato part, or it could be optional, or what?
It's not exactly optional, but it is an accompaniment. The violin is, and on the title page it says accompaniment of flute and violin. And I'm glad you asked that question. And The sixth sonata, Aisslinn Nosky and I discovered, was incomplete. So instead of having a separate line in the score for the violin, or a separate part written out for the violin, she just combined the violin into the right hand staff of the sonata. But it became very clear. So it looked like just a very kind of stacked, thick writing in the right hand of the piano. And we started reading through it at first and said, that's weird. There is no violin part separately, but it became very, very soon clear. Like, I would have all of these double thirds and double sixths and things. I like that. That's not like the other sonatas. They weren't that thick. That, you know, it was sort of her shorthand for the violin to just read from the piano part. And actually, Aisslinn and I did a little bit of arranging and filling in of passages that were left a little empty. So we think the Sixth Sonata wasn't completely, you know, fully fleshed out, even though it was printed and published. So we did add or sort of refine a little bit of the part, especially for the violin. Yeah. Oh, we have a question from Jörn Bausman. I hope I'm saying that right. Maria, you can correct me. We wondered if use of fortepiano instead of harpsichord was influenced by ideas of renewing social structure. Yeah. Conservative versus liberal, revolutionary, democratic, leading to the French Revolution. Ooh, great question. A bit like the guitar became a symbol of renewing ideas in the 60s and 70s of the 20th century. Maria Patricia, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think like with the fortepiano is like one.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Patricia, go ahead.
You go. I'm sorry. It's the connection. Sorry, you go.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I think there's a delay when I talk, so the timing is all off. But I would say that the piano was popular long before the democratic ideals were. I don't see the connection of, you know, oh, it's a more democratic. It's an instrument that fits more into a liberal society, because it was extremely popular way before the French Revolution among the aristocrats, and it was just the newest thing, and I think it had more to do with accessibility of amateurism, you know, that there was like and more of an interest in amateurs being able to play, and not, you know, before you had like professional musicians and they played on a very high level, and amateur music making was maybe singing at home, but not as much instrumental music maybe. And I think the piano made it, first of all, it was not as expensive as a harpsichord, as a grand piano. You know, the grand pianos were incredibly expensive, but the square pianos were very affordable. So you could put a square piano in your living room, like a nice piece of furniture, and make music on it. I don't know if it was particularly more democratic, and because, you know, you didn't see lower middle class people playing the piano. It was really an upper middle class. That's probably enough for now.
Did you want to add anything, Patricia?
No, I agree with Maria. I think maybe it became lately, like when we see these things from our century or even like from the next century, then maybe you can relate it more to a new kind of society, because the piano started inhabiting everyone's houses, and then maybe it is actually related to the fact that the society changed, and like the idea of the old regime disappeared, and you know, there was this transition to a more liberal, and therefore democratic society. So maybe it became kind of like a symbol. And yes, and yeah, there's sorry, I'm reading a comment from Mariana, which is also right. I think like the idea of enjoying leisure time, it's also something that like normal. I don't know if this is what you meant. You can expand on this, but I think that this was an idea that common people couldn't really think about. I mean, they would, but not maybe with a piano in particular until a certain point in history. But you can go with that. Sorry.
Yeah, I do. I was reminded today.
If I may.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm sorry. No, I just wanted to add that 2 nights ago, we had a big thunderstorm here and we lost power. And it made me realize how many candles you need in the evening in order to do anything. So if anything, poor people couldn't spend that much money on all these candles that they needed, to be able to make music in the evening. You see these pictures of beautiful chandeliers, and that's expensive to have that much enough light at night. And I think the working people went to bed when the sun went down.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing is in terms of cultural associations, the playing of keyboard instruments was deemed, thought of as more appropriate for women, and men were, seen to be. It was appropriate for them in the 1800s to play stringed instruments. That was more of an acceptably male activity, but for women to be sitting and playing the keyboards was more appropriate there.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, we're gonna wrap up soon, but we have some quick questions. Pearl Gerstel asks where she can hear more music of Jane Mary Guest. Pearl, as I mentioned, wait for the album to come out that I just recorded, and I'm very excited to share with everyone. So Pearl, you're my Facebook friend, so I'll make remind you there. And Karoru, hello Karo. She's a good friend of mine, old acquaintance and colleague from Holland when I was a student there. She said, I wonder if the woman composer's position was not as bad as at the time of Clara Schumann, because Martinez is admitted to the Accademia Philharmonia Bologna. Yeah, what do you think, Patricia? And Guest was noble and popular. I think you're right, Karu. I agree. It was there was an avenue for women in the late 1800s, early 1900s. But I'm sure Maria and Patricia have some thoughts on that. Yeah.
Well, I think like even though in the case of Martinez, even though she was
I think it's.
Maria, hold on one sec. Patricia, keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, even though she was accepted at the Filarmonica di Bologna, she only published 2 compositions. And even though like we only have not so many, right? I don't know the exact number, but like she was supposed to have written more than 31 keyboard sonatas, for example, and also other pieces, but we only have 3 now, and only 2 of them were published. So even though she was accepted under certain conditions. So like it was very relevant for the society at the time that there was a woman accepted, but she was not like at the same level, if I'm kind of like transmitting what I mean, than the other men at the academia, because she, for example, she never traveled there to perform or to even like to premiere one of her pieces. So like she always kept like kind of like in the shadows. That's also why the shadows in my video. So yeah, I wanted to say that. So
yeah, I would just like to add that publishing your music was, if you see, I can imagine that somebody like Jane Mary Guest, who came from a business family who were working with their hands and earning a living with some craft and a business, that publishing music and selling it was more to make money, I think, than anything else. because it wasn't like, people were playing it in public. It was for the wider audience, like people subscribed to it, and they needed to buy music, and if they were amateurs, so they could play music at home because they were not writing their own music. So I think the idea of publishing music is a little different from the way, and that's why it makes sense to me that Martinez, who was quite well off later in life, she didn't need to publish music because she didn't need to earn the money, because it was kind of a money-making venture, and you see that especially in London. So I apologize for my audio issues, but I just wanted to remind people before I leave of the next Salon on October 29th, and you'll get plenty of announcements for that. And I hope to meet you there soon. And so I think I will leave it there. Thank you all.
Thank you, Patricia, for joining us. Patricia Garcia-Gil and Maria Rose Yiheng Yang from the International Fortepiano Salon. Thank you so much, friends, for being with us. Come back next time. Have a great day.